Hello everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. Thanks for watching. So this is part 2 of my video series on Hobbes. Part 1 was about Hobbes' very general philosophical worldview and about some very introductory things about him as a person. We talked about his metaphysics, his epistemology, and his ethics. Said some very general things about them. We know that he's a metaphysical materialist. We know that he's an empiricist, and we know that he is a natural law theorist. And his natural law theory has an egoistic flavor going for it, compared to or contrasted with an altruistic ethics. So an egoistic ethics says that our fundamental obligations are to promote our own good, and an altruistic ethics is an ethics that includes obligations to promote the interests of others. Okay, Hobbes's view is egoistic. So let me just give you a flavor of some of the natural laws that Hobbes provides us with. Let me give you the first 3. There are a whole host of natural laws or laws of nature that Hobbes gives us, but let's just focus on the big first 3. So the first law of nature, totally in accordance with his ethical egoism, is the idea that we're to seek peace. Seek peace when one can do so. Hobbes immediately clarifies there might be circumstances in which one can't seek peace, and what Hobbes goes on to say there is when one can't seek peace, one has the right, or one is obligated, to use the means of war to one's own advantage. So you can see the egoistic flavor in the fundamental principle of his ethical system. Seek peace when one can, but when one can't, use the means of war to one's advantage. That's the first law of nature, according to his natural law theory. Okay, and we're going to see why he's saying that, but again, it's egoistic in nature. The second law of nature tells us to make contracts, make agreements, okay, make contracts with others in the way of peace, okay, of course when one can do so. And then the third law of nature is to keep your contracts, keep the agreements, keep your promises. So I'm thinking about the second law of nature, make contracts with others, make promises, make agreements with others where you give your word to do something, okay? And then in the way of peace. And then the third law of nature is to keep your contracts. And that third law of nature, Hobbes tells us, is his principle of justice. That's the origin of justice in his ethical system. Okay, you're just when you keep your contracts, when you keep your promises, when you keep your word. You're unjust when you don't do so. Very, very broadly understood. Okay, so those are the first 3 laws of nature. First one, seek peace when one can. When one can't, use the means of war to one's advantage. 2, make contracts with others in the way of peace. So that tells us how, right, we go about seeking peace, is we make contracts with others in the way of peace. And then the third law of nature, keep your contracts. Okay, the foundation for justice in Hobbes' ethical system. Okay, hopefully we're good with those first 3 laws of nature. We get at least a sense of how they're supposed to be egoistic. Okay, and now let's move on to providing Hobbes' account of human nature. Then it's ultimately going to be related in some way back to these laws of nature, as we're going to see, and how his theory of human nature can be understood in the context of the development of Hobbes' political philosophy. And again, that will be connected to thinking about the laws of nature. That's why I spent some time laying out Hobbes' natural law view, because it's very important to understanding other aspects of his philosophy, as we're now going to see. Okay, so Hobbes, when he develops his idea of political philosophy, so again, just back it up, I'm going to develop Hobbes' theory of human nature in the context of talking about how he develops his political philosophy. Okay, so when he develops his political philosophy, what he's interested in doing is providing us with an account that justifies political authority. So we need to have an account, right, of what gives certain individuals in society political power over others. So one thing that distinguishes, say, not being in a political society from being in a political society is the fact that in a political society there's political power. There are those who have the power to rule, and there are the subjects or the citizens of that rule. So then those who are the citizens, those who are the subjects, have obligations to the rulers to live up to the rule of law. Okay, so Hobbes, in an effort to try to justify political authority, which he wants to do, is he has us think about people living in a society. Hobbes actually doesn't even think it counts as a society, but set that aside for a minute. People living in a society where there is no rule of law, where there is no political power. He calls this state of existence, this society, if you will, in some weaker sense than Hobbes understands the term society, a state of nature. So this is a state of nature. So we have this idea of a state of nature. It goes way back to philosophers like Plato. It's developed and talked about in the medieval period as well. But Hobbes takes this idea and has us imagine people living together in pre-political society in what's known as a state of nature. Okay? And he has us think carefully about what a state of nature would be like. Okay, and he thinks by thinking carefully about a state of nature, put ourselves in a position to understand what happens when we leave a state of nature to form a political society, and that'll provide us with a clue for understanding what justifies political authority in the first place, and what justifies the fact that we have obligations as citizens to the rule of law in a political society. Okay, those are two parts of the same coin. So, what's a state of nature like? Well, again, we know the fundamental thing is that there's no common political power. Okay, there's no rule of law in the sense of political sense of law. The laws of nature, so the natural law, the laws of nature that are egoistic according to Hobbes, they are in some sense binding on us in a state of nature. It's just that they're binding in an internal sense. They're binding in the sense that God will hold us accountable to whether or not we live up to them. But there's nobody external to us in a political side. There's no other human beings, put it that way, in a state of nature who would have any kind of authority over us to make the laws of nature binding on us. So the laws of nature are not going to be externally binding, as I like to put it, in a state of nature. Because there's no common political power, and the laws of nature are not binding. Okay? There's also going to be scarce resources in a political society. There might be lots of resources, but they're just going to be too raw and undeveloped for us to use as resources. So there's going to be scarce resources in a state of nature. Moreover, here we start getting into Hobbes' account of human nature. That's really, really important. On Hobbes' view, in a state of nature, everybody is roughly equal. It's not really until people start getting educated and we live in a political society that we start seeing quite a bit of disparity so we start seeing disparity, meaning inequality among people. So in a state of nature, people are generally equal in this sense, physically, or these senses, physically and mentally. He doesn't think people are morally equal. He doesn't have an idea of intrinsic moral value that human beings all share. He doesn't agree with that. He thinks that our equality is mentally and physically understood. Okay, where there are inequalities, they're easily quelled. They're easily dealt with, because someone ends up being much stronger than everybody else, and strength in numbers will help someone overpower those. So if you think about it, in a state of nature, so far we have no common political power. There are scarce resources, which is going to lead to all kinds of competition for them. That's really important. And people are generally equal. And given that we're generally mentally and physically equal, we're all going to have the same abilities with respect to getting the scarce resources. And this, according to Hobbes, is going to end up creating a kind of tension, a kind of distrust among other people. Because we recognize that as we want to get the scarce resources, there's someone just as strong and able mentally as us to get those resources. That creates a kind of distrust. I could really harm you in my effort to get the resources, but you can likewise really harm me. In fact, we can probably kill each other in our effort to get the resources. Again, that's a basis of distrust. In a state of nature, we're free. Hobbes thinks that human beings have free will. We have the ability to act freely. That's part of his theory of human nature as well. It's complicated how he works that out, but he thinks we're free. But the crucial aspect of freedom, of our freedom in a state of nature, according to Hobbes, is going to be that everyone has the right to everything in a state of nature. And this is precisely because nobody has a right to anything, in the sense of having property rights to anything in a state of nature. You can't have property rights in a state of nature because there's nobody, guess what, politically, to enforce them. So there's no such thing as property in a state of nature, according to Hobbes. So we're going to have freedom. Everyone's going to have the right. What that means is everyone's going to have the right to everything in a state of nature. So if I want to, get some apples out of the orchard nearby, and you want them or someone else wants them. Let's not make it you, but someone else wants them. I could do whatever I want to them in order to get those resources, right? That might mean killing them. Might mean seriously maiming them in order to get those resources, keep myself alive. Okay. So remember, according to the first law of nature, seek peace when one can. When I'm in a state of nature, though, I might not be able to seek peace. In those cases, then I can use the means of war to my own advantage. That means I could do whatever I want to someone in a warlike manner in order to get the resources. But guess what? Other people would have the right to do the very same thing to me in order to get the resources. Okay, so you get the sense of what the state of nature looks like pretty quickly reading Hobbes. Okay, so we're gonna be equal, we're gonna be free. Okay, in a state of nature. Okay, and these relate to our human nature. Hobbes also thinks that we have rational foresight. So we have a rational faculty, and we use that to predict what's likely to happen in the future. That's what rational foresight amounts to. And on Hobbes' view, what we do is we spend a lot of time planning, thinking about how we can get more resources in order to make sure that we continue living. The foundation of an egoistic system, is going to be to keep oneself alive, to self-preserve. And so what I need to do in order to live a good life for me is at the very least keep myself alive. And so that means what I'm doing very regularly is I'm thinking about, well, how can I keep myself alive? Well, I need to get the resources. I need to get enough food, nutrition in my body to keep myself alive. Okay? And so I'm going to be planning on how to keep myself alive, and then some. I also want to enjoy my life, so I'm planning on that. What comes with that is anticipating how I can gain advantages, anticipating how I can defeat people in battle. So there's always kind of, in a state of nature, given our rational foresight and our planning, there's going to be the anticipation of there being violent struggles with others for the limited resources in a state of nature. So rational foresight is going to be a crucial part of human nature. But also, what Hobbes claims is that given our motivational structure, we're limitedly altruistic, meaning we're not purely, on Hobbes' view, egoistic. Keep in mind that egoism and altruism here have different senses than the ethical ones that I've introduced earlier. Okay? The sense of egoism and altruism here involve what our motivations are like. So this is a human nature claim. On Hobbes' view, we're not purely egoistic, meaning we're not such that we can only act for the sake of our own self-interest. Okay? Rather, we're limitedly altruistic, meaning that we dominantly act for our own self-interest. We're dominantly motivated to act for our self-interest. Still, there are a limited range of cases, hence it's called limited altruism, in which we can act for the sake of others. And they tend to be, right, for those who are near us, like our children, our family members, and our close friends. Other than that, right, we're dominantly egoistic with respect to our motivations. So keep in mind there's a difference between being ethically egoistic and motivationally egoistic, and ethically altruistic and motivationally altruistic. Those are different concepts. One's a claim about how we should act, right, how we're obligated to act, and the others are claims about, right, how we're motivated to act. So those are matters of fact. Those are facts about human motivation. Okay? So the key aspects to review state of nature involve: one, there's no common political power. The laws of nature aren't externally binding because nobody has the authority to make me live up to any laws. 3, everyone's is mentally and physically equal to each other, roughly. There are going to be some outliers, but they're worked out pretty smoothly. We're free in a state of nature. We have free will, and everyone has the right to everything in a state of nature because nobody has any property rights, political property rights to anything in a state of nature. We exercise rational foresight in order to plan how we can gain advantages for getting the resources that are scarce, as we know. And we're limitedly altruistic with respect to our motivations. We're limitedly altruistic, meaning we're typically seeking our own advantage, okay? In rare cases, in limited cases, okay, we're seeking the advantage, okay, of those near us, okay? Typically close friends and family members and the like. Okay, so that sets the stage, okay, for Hobbes' state of nature. In my next video, I'm going to tell you what Hobbes thinks, right, results from thinking about the state of nature, what the state of nature actually is like, okay? As you can probably guess, it's not a pretty picture at this point, okay? So when I return, I'll be talking about Hobbes' theory of state of nature as a state of war. Okay, more soon. Thank you for watching.